Testing. There we go. There.
No, you're not. Hey, Ben. Mine's working if you want to.
Well, now I'm going to get a little closer, I think. We'll call this meeting to order. See, July 20th. So we'll go from there. And then we'll have roll call. Kelly?
Matt Reynolds.
Here.
Ashley Paddock. John Lastly. Kevin Krulik. Absent. Keith Campbell.
Here.
Jeremy Lawler.
Here.
Brian Taylor. And Ashley. Lauren Gross.
Okay. Need a motion to approve the minutes.
A motion to approve the 18th Planning Commission minutes.
Matt Reynolds.
Yes.
Ashley Paddock. John Lastly.
Yes.
Absent Keith. Brian Tandy. Lori Gross.
Okay. Off Lebanon Street. The property is Zone CB, Central Business, and in the Thoroughfare Overlay District. Ben?
Good evening, Planning Commission members. I believe my microphone's working, so there is one of them that's working. I'll walk through a little bit of the details of this project for you. We do have the applicant here this evening to talk to you a little bit about the project overall. I'll go through the technical details of the site and the design and the development that's being proposed, and then give them a chance to tell them a little bit about their thought process behind this. This is what's being called the Brakeman Building. If they want to bring up the screen here, I'll kind of walk through the site for you. Hopefully this works. It worked earlier. For those of you that are familiar with the area, we're just a little bit west of City Hall here. This is the former Estes property on South Lebanon Street. The building right now sits where you now see this proposed parking lot, and this would be the west side of the road. This would be developed over where New Life Recovery Center is, and then the parking area to the south of them. So what they're proposing here is a 4-story building on the west side of the road that you see depicted here, with some parking and service areas to the back, dumpster area. They have an entrance out on South Lebanon Street, and then one just on the west end as well. On the east side of the road, the long-term goal here is that this site also gets developed with a multi-story building. But what we're doing is, in the meantime, they're going to be developing this with a parking lot to serve the overall development. It does meet primarily our development standards. It doesn't have quite all the curbing and landscaping would otherwise would require for a permanent parking lot. But this is what I would, I guess, call a semi-permanent parking lot. It is paved. It does have some curbing and landscaping, so it will look like a parking lot in our downtown. It's just intended, hopefully, within the next 5 years or so, that gets torn out and replaced with that side of the road. So this is what we have here. This has, in terms of history of the approvals for this, they have been to the Board of Zoning Appeals twice. The first time was back in March, and there were a series of development standards variances that were approved for this project. One would be a parking setback 2 is the parking space dimensions, some of the parking spaces to the rear of the building, just to get them to fit and make sure that this works from a geometric perspective and flow. These are 9 by 18 spaces rather than 9 by 20 spaces, so to get that approved. The third one was parking lot curbing. So this parking lot on the east side of the road, it does sheet drain into a ditch that runs into a storm sewer at the south part of the property. So as part of this, it doesn't have curbing to allow for the sheet draining. Parking lot landscaping, again, on the east side of the road, they do have some landscaping over here. Let me pull up the landscape plans so you can at least see that, and I'll walk through a little bit more specifically here in a second. They are going to plant a number of trees on the east side of the road that they just don't have the shrub requirements. Again, if this is going to be replaced in 3 to 5 years with a second building, it would be an expense that doesn't make sense at this time if it's going to have to be torn back out. The fifth one is building height. We allow 50-foot buildings in our downtown district. This 4-story building, I think, goes to 54 feet. There's a couple of architectural elements that were really important to the overall building design that increased that height just a little bit. We felt it was more important to keep that building design than it was to try to meet that maximum height. And it's not for the entire building, it's just for a couple of architectural elements that I'll show you here in a second. And the last one was minimum living area per dwelling unit. We do require up to, I think it's 600 feet minimum per dwelling unit. They do have some small efficiency apartments that are smaller than that. They're looking at the market demand for some of those smaller units and seeing that there's strong demand, for a young professional that's not wanting a large one-bedroom apartment. This just gives them a small little efficiency space, and that was also approved by the BZA. And that was in March, and then things changed over the last 3 months. Since that time, the applicant has found that banks aren't real interested in lending money to construct projects that have a speculative retail space in them. Because as we all know, there is no demand for new retail space right now, because retail demand in general is significantly lower than what we would expect. So the banks have really pulled back on lending for projects like this, and they were either told you have to reduce the amount of speculative retail space in the building, or you need to have them all pre-leased before we'll loan you the money. Well, the idea of pre-leasing this building before it starts construction, it's an unknown time period it might take before we could pre-lease this whole building. We felt it was a better alternative to allow them to turn some of that retail space into apartments, additional apartments. The bank was fine with additional residential spaces. Our big challenge then was to make sure that we were really keeping the streetscape appropriate, even though they were going to be residential spaces. And the one thing we talked to them about is, let's say 6-7 years from now, even after the second building is built, if the demand increases sufficiently for retail space, we want to make sure that that first floor space could be modified and remodeled to become commercial space again. But in the meantime, let's get some rent-paying apartment dwellers in there to generate revenue that allows the bank to loan the money for the project. So we really looked at the architecture in the revised building to make sure that it didn't really detract from the streetscape. And I'll show that to you here. This is a 3-dimensional model. This is as you can see, I talked about the building height. These two, oops, it's gonna have to regenerate here a second. Hopefully. So these are the two building elements in kind of this darker tan color that exceed the maximum building height. Otherwise, the rest of the building does meet the maximum building height. As you can see here, this corner of the building will remain a space that's going to be marketed for restaurant tenants. So it is not all residential. There is still a mixed-use component. There will be about a 5,000 square foot space here to try to get a nice sit-down restaurant in the corner of this building. The remainder of the building, as you move northbound, is now residential apartments. So again, we want to try to keep the materials similar on the first floor moving across. And then there's this actually is a very interesting building from a design perspective, because it has to attach to existing buildings to the north. So it actually goes from a 4-story building down to a 2-story building to mimic what's to the north. And that building has a different architectural design. The first floor windows have canopies on them to kind of mimic our retail spaces in our downtown, to try to make it look a little bit more commercial oriented, even though those are residential apartments. So the building is all masonry products, as you see here, brick and limestone on the front. Again, like I said, it's a 4-story building, so you got a 2-story space here for the restaurant, but then all the rest of the stories are all residential. when we decided it made more sense to make the transition to residential as opposed to leaving all the retail, and they did have to go back to the BZA. Our downtown doesn't permit residential units on first floors and multi-story buildings like this, so they did get a use variance to allow them to do that, and that was approved in at the July meeting of the BZA. So we're back before you tonight. Now we've got all those variances in place to get the development plan approved for this project. So I'll go back to the site plan here in a second, just kind of walk through some of the highlights for you. This has been to TAC. I've got all the comments in your staff report. I know their engineer has worked through a number of these already, but we just want to make sure that we have those for the record in the staff reports. You know what we're reviewing in terms of the site layout and design. That goes into a lot more detail than I'm sure any of you really are concerned about conduit and sizes of pipes and all that good stuff. In terms of the, excuse me, the development standards, I have outlined those for you. And there was a question earlier this evening before the meeting started about the parking requirements. Goodness. So I did want to walk through that. So we do have definition of the number of parking spaces required for the residential units because those are defined. There are 44 units in this building, some of them studio and 1 bedroom and some of them 2 bedrooms. So we have calculated the number of spaces required for that. And then because the restaurant is not defined yet, our definition for parking requirements for restaurant is 1 space per 3 seats plus 1 space per employee on the larger shift. Well, certainly we don't know how many parking spaces we need for that resident or that restaurant space yet because we don't have a definition of what that restaurant looks like, how many tables they got, how many seats they have. So I did a very rough calculation. I found another restaurant that's a similar size that had their seating capacity and kind of use that to roughly calculate. And I'm coming up with their requirement being less than what they've provided based on our parking standards. I wouldn't expect that it would be more than what I'd calculated and possibly could be less depending on what restaurant goes in there. So they have sufficient, in fact, more parking spaces than they're required. Probably a good thing for the residential uses in terms of providing spaces for the cars. So they do have plenty of parking spaces. Probably, I think it's between 15 and 20 spaces more than what they need that they have on site based on my rough calculation put together for the restaurant space. So they have met the parking requirement there. And then just walk through lighting. They're not currently proposing any parking lot or exterior lighting right now. So I just made a note in there if they do intend at some point to add the lighting in the future, they would have to provide a lighting standard and photometric plan that met all of our standards if they chose to add that later. So that they are aware of that if that gets added in the future. In terms of landscaping, I'll go back to that plan a little bit so you can just see that again. They have met all the applicable standards with the variances in place. We'll let it reload here a second. As you can see here, they have met all the parking standards for this parking lot that is to the west of the building. You can see they have all the trees and shrubs. They have done street tree grates according to what we'd like to see, somewhat similar to what we've already got downtown on the square that we just redid in the last couple of years. So they are making sure to create a design that mimics that and to some extent to keep that streetscape similar. And actually, they've pulled the building. You can kind of see here a little bit. This is the north end. You can see the building to the north actually is closer to the street than theirs. What they wanted to do is actually widen the sidewalk area to create a more pedestrian-friendly area out in front of the building. If there was the restaurant wanted to create some seating. They have some plaza space to the south, and they could also put seating out in front of the building. They just wanted that wider space, so they have some flexibility to do some of those things out in front of the building. So that's the landscape plan. In terms of the signage, let me go back. I believe my aerial has. You can see here they're identifying the building itself. Oh, it's got to regenerate again. They're identifying the building itself as the Brakeman building on this. This is the south elevation, so as you're coming into town on Lebanon Street, you'll see the building identified with the Brakeman that runs up and down on the side of the building. And then the restaurant space would have the ability to have, in this space, up to 3 spots where they could provide signage. It's not saying that they're going to do signage in each one of those 3 spots, but they do have that ability. At such time that a restaurant comes into play, they will have to get their own sign permits for those signs, so that'll be in place. And then in terms of the architecture, again, we talked about it a little bit. We've got a variety of materials, limestone and brick primarily on the front. The rear of it does use some additional hardy plank products that were approved by the Historic Preservation Commission. This has gone through that review and approval as well, so they got everything in place in terms of planning approvals, and this is their last step tonight. So again, the architecture meets all of our downtown requirements for our central business district and our downtown overlay. And we have, this is probably about the fourth or fifth iteration of this architecture to the building to get it to where you see it tonight. So with that, and review of the submitted development plan, staff finds compliance with the Unified Development Ordinance requirements, and we recommend approval of the development plan contingent on the following conditions. One, TAC comments, and that the applicant adequately address any remaining City of Lebanon Technical Advisory Committee comments prior to application for any building permits or site improvements. And lighting plan, if plans for exterior parking lot lighting are added, the applicant shall submit required photometric plans and cut sheets for lighting fixtures to ensure compliance with the UDO. Be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Commission have a question?
Yes, sir.
Quick question, I'm trying to find it, I guess mine's not uploading any faster than
Yep. I'll go back to that site plan. Yes, yeah, so you see here, if they want to bring that screen up again, the buildings here, they have a couple of dumpsters just west of the building, and it does have all the appropriate screening and landscaping requirements yep.
And I guess this one may be directed towards the applicant more. I'm highly concerned about the lack of lighting, parking lot lighting. I know that's, a lighting plan is a possibility, but to have a parking lot with, was it 40, 50, 60 spaces on the east side of the road? This lot behind our building here for a city building has 9 lights surrounding it. The one across the street has 5. And to have this much larger lot for residential, I think it's something that we need to strongly encourage that additional lighting coming to it.
For sure.
I know it's a semi-permanent structure for the parking lot. But
Yeah, and it's, we don't require lighting, but I'm sure they are probably taking a look at that. Certainly it would make, there would be some logic behind adding some lighting out there for security for residences if they're coming in the evening, so. But I'll let them address that further.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, sir? Yes. Yeah, so that's something, and Kevin may be able to chime in on this too, since he arrived. But we're going to have to work with NDOT to figure out what NDOT's going to permit there, because it is a state road. The thought here is at a minimum that there's some sort of pedestrian activated signal that's there and markings where the crossing takes place. If we can do more, if NDOT lets us do more to protect the pedestrians, we will, but they're going to dictate that to some extent. But I don't know, Kevin, I know we've talked about this a couple of times. Hey, we'll have a mic. That's a good question. I think NDOT's going to have to consider something. I think it's just what level of crossing they allow. I mean, there's a possibility they could say, well, you can put markings in the road, but we're not going to let you do a pedestrian activated signal. I mean, we really don't know yet exactly what they're going to permit. We'll do as much as they allow. I mean, if they allow the raised crossing like we've done on Main Street, that would also be helpful to slow people down. My guess is NDOT's not going to allow that for a state route. But we're going to get as much as we can out there to make sure it's safe to cross there. I mean, if NDOT doesn't allow anything, I can guarantee people are still going to cross there. They're not going to walk up to the intersection. So it's even less safe if they don't allow anything. So I'm guessing that NDOT's going to permit something. We just don't know at what level yet.
The reality is a lot across the street right there now. I've worked here in blocks, so we see it a lot, but I'm sure that we work around there a lot too. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic coming to go from CVS, the apartment building, from the recovery home, veterans, parties. There's a lot of back and forth across the middle of the block there.
I guess that's just what concerns me a little bit as far as if you put something up there very similar to something in front of the building.
Yeah.
I mean, your traffic is considerably more.
Yeah.
You know, going up and down Lebanon Street, and I mean, people can't drive going in front of there because they don't understand, well, it's a stop sign, but it's not.
Right.
So,
The other.
Is there another way of doing it? I mean, if that becomes a possibility, is there another way of doing it that would not?
Yeah, I mean, the hope is we can get an activated. Yeah. The hope is we can get an activated signal there that's only on when somebody's crossing, so that will draw attention. The other thing I didn't point out is the plan here, and another reason why they pulled the building back from the street a little bit is they're hoping to create some on-street parking in front of the building, which will automatically slow people down as well. So we're hoping that NDOT will go along with that because it does not actually narrow the street. The drive lanes are all the same size. They've actually pulled the building back and pulled the parking into where the sidewalk is now in order to provide parking there. So that just by design will slow people down if there are cars parked there. So that's also something we're hoping that will draw people's attention to slow down because there's something else happening there if they encounter parked cars.
How many parked cars would be allowed there?
There are, looks like 6 spaces, and just in front of the buildings. There's 6 on-street spaces in front of the building. Yeah. Maybe 7. I may have miscounted.
To get back to your question, there's not a lot beyond pedestrian crossing signal. That's the view there, it's not an intersection, so the state's not going to warrant a stop right there, or a stop sign for that matter. So really, the pedestrian actually crossing is probably the highest level of protection. But again, it's not always.
Sure, yeah.
And it's not perfect. As you know, on Main Street, plenty of people stop at those. I'd rather have them stop when they don't have to than the opposite. Of course, if you're behind that person, sometimes that can be a little frustrating. But generally, that's safer than people go through the crossing. Absolutely. NDOT would definitely require advanced warning signs.
Anyone else have another question? Then I have one more.
Yes, sir. Uh-huh.
You commented about the 3 to 5 years before they build over there parking lot. What happens if we do not build in 3 to 5 years?
Well, so there's a whole project agreement behind this that we're still working on that's dozens of pages long. So they will be purchasing the west side of the road from the city, and the city will actually retain ownership of the east side of the road and allow them to use it for their parking. So the agreement's set up that way. So we will maintain control of the east side of the road. So if they at some point say, we're not interested, or we're moving on, this hasn't worked out the way we hoped, if another investor comes in, we're they have first right of refusal for sure on that side, but if they decide they're out, we could do something else with it. But we're at least, the agreement says we're limited to what we can do because this accommodates their required parking, so we can't just tear the lot out and do something else without accommodating their parking some other way.
I understand that, and the same thing, drop out.
Mhm.
In 5 years, who's going to put the lights in the city?
I don't know that anybody would necessarily put up the lights. And they may be able to address lighting here in a second if they've already got plans to look at that anyway.
What I can offer on that is, there are several already built poles in the alley next to that parking lot. So in the city, is always working with Lebanon utilities to get lighting put up in areas of the city, whether they're projector lighting like in our downtown or just more traditional security lighting in areas that are dark around the city. So we have an agreement in place with Lebanon utilities that covers the cost, the operating costs, the long-term maintenance costs of installing lights in that situation. So it could be a situation where long-term, if their project is able to move forward with future phases within the side road, the city can step in and partner with Lebanon utilities and put those poles up. I believe the current rate is $8 a month installation. Operation.
Any other questions?
Yeah, one question. To the north there looks like like that's got it from the state. What will be done to soundproof those northern apartments?
I'll let them address some of it. I mean, there's a whole architectural design that went into what they did. I know they're actually going to have to both protect the side of that building. Again, these buildings share walls for all practical purposes. So when they take down the New Life building, they're going to have to do something to basically make that building weather tight so it will last for a long period of time. But yeah, they'll be able to address that a little bit more specifically on the construction of the building. And of course, the hope is that there's a restaurant in this building that will hopefully have people in there later in the evening as well. So I think the type of person that lives in a building like this might expect there to be some later in the evening activity anyway. I'm good. There no other questions? Make some room for you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Adam D'Angelo with Forza Commercial Real Estate. Give me a moment here while I sync to the technology. I feel privileged to be able to take off my mask, so I just want to state that. Thank you for letting me do that. It's fogging up my glasses. Sorry, let's just tap this one. That's it right there. I think I might have hit it. Now do I hit remote view? Ah, there we go. Where's that? Come on, baby. Success. Okay. So we are here tonight on a 2-year-long journey in working in conjunction with your staff and leadership, and they have just been fantastic throughout this entire process. So we're very grateful for that partnership that's evolved, and we understand the level of work that's gone into the project thus far. And so, again, very grateful to be in this position, despite some of the additional challenges that we've been presented with as a global economy and world today. So, Project Brakeman, this is a very special project that's near and dear to our company, but hopefully also to the community itself. I'll talk a little bit about us briefly. Our company was founded in 2015, really with the intent of bettering housing in various markets here in Indiana and secondary markets. And what I mean by that is providing higher quality housing for workforce primarily and/or professionals, whether it's through redevelopment of existing assets, which we'll show you some precedent images and projects that we've done, or it's a newer construction or newer product like we've done in some other communities and what we're proposing to do here today. Keep taking it in and out of presentation mode, so I apologize. So both myself and my business partner, John Fleming, are here tonight. He and I have been working together for the entirety of the formation of the company. Feel very fortunate to be partnered with him. His disciplines are primarily in a variety of disciplines in the law field, but primarily in finance, which has been instrumental in helping architect this deal and working directly with staff to get us to this point. John would indicate that I am the dreamer of the bunch, so and I would second that. And this is only honestly a way that we're able to fulfill that by bringing this project to fruition. I think it's an excellent project for the entire community, but a great place for this to bring life, additional life to downtown. I'm just going to show you just a couple of sample portfolio projects that we've worked on over the years. This was a project that we acquired and renovated right next to Wabash College campus, one street off. No coincidence that my partner went to Wabash College there. So, but that was a very successful project that we were able to increase rents substantially and provide a higher quality of space, not for students, actually for workforce in the community. And people responded very quickly, and we were very successful in renovating and actually selling that project. The views, this project started a few years ago when we acquired Meadowview Apartments in LaPel, Indiana. We then in turn on that same site on Main Street built 9 more villa condo apartments with attached garages, and thought we had such great success. We went across town, bought 4 acres there, and did the same thing and replicated that. We call that the Views. It's a total of 60 apartments, and it's I think we just crested 94% occupancy. And I will say this: our property management team, I'm very proud of to say that the delinquency is very low, and our collections are extraordinarily high, over 90%, which I think is a strong point to make given the conditions we're in today. Because you look at rent strikes and those kinds of things across the country, and those are great points and a credit to our team. So that was a $7.4 million project in a variety of different product across town there in LaPel. But again, the focus is really on higher quality finishes with space from 1 to 2, 3-bedroom units that are conducive for family, but also the professional. This was a public-private partnership and a project that was near and dear to John and I, working with the city of Wabash and the mayor there and their planning staff. We redeveloped what is known as the Bedford building right across from the town hall. What a fun project. It's been fun to breathe life back into that building, and it has been a process. So much like we've seen over here, we're ready and fully prepared and engineered to go through that process here across the street. But that's been a fun project, and it's similar to what we have here. It also is in an opportunity zone, and so we're able to use that enhancement for ourselves and for the city and for the community. This has been another fun project that we've worked on together. In conjunction with another partner, we acquired the old Pizza King building in Zionsville, and over the course of the last 12 to 13 months, just received our building permit to be able to proceed in tenanting it with a new distiller, Hotel Tango Whiskey, and having a nice outdoor scene and fire pit there. So I would say, in addition to providing quality housing in various markets in Indiana, we are also very opportunistic, and I think this is a really good precedent project and image to show you. So for our feature presentation, the Brakeman project has evolved a couple of different times over the last 2 years, but it's primarily now focused on the Opportunity Zone side of the street, which is the west side of the street of Lebanon Street, where the current New Life buildings are located, the New Life Men's Recovery Center. So we're proposing to take down those buildings and resurrect or construct a new structure, 4 stories. That's in totality, it'll be a $9.3 million project, a total of 38,000 plus square foot. And it's been re-envisioned. I would say we've all gone through our challenges and struggles with COVID, including us. I would say this time period, although challenging, has given us time to really pause and really think through how can we be more efficient, not only with our building materials and our product, but our design. And that has helped us evolve into what we see in a re-envisioned footprint for the first floor, which we'll discuss here in a moment. But it also allowed us to add 44 residential units, which has a significant demand for market rate rent apartments here in Lebanon, based on your market studies. Again, I keep popping in and out of this presentation mode, so I apologize. This is a footprint of the first floor. So a part of that process of re-envisioning the footprint has been so well articulated is lenders, as we've gone through this time period, had become a little bit concerned about making the entirety of the first floor all retail and commercial, and I think we all wanted that, and we still do. And this particular plan not only gives us 8 additional units on the lowest level, and reduces the size of the retail footprint by 50%, but it also gives us an opportunity to have 3 ADA compliant units on the first floor, which I think is an important thing to note. So as you look at the unit mix there, we have a variety of units from efficiency all the way through to 2 bedrooms throughout the building, to hopefully to fulfill some of the demand and lack of supply that's here today for those professionals and or families, young professional families that are moving into the market or looking just for a better, high quality place to live. The intent again the idea will be to be able to have the ability to convert that later, whether it's possible for co-working space and or additional office or professional, and whatever the market will demand on that. I hope they're going to let me get my rooftop deck out of this. I really want that rooftop deck, guys. So I've been saying this for 2 years. I think John is he's tired of getting blue in the face hearing me say this, but the plan would hopefully be to contemplate a deck up there for amenity for the residential units, or the opportunity, dare I say, to punch through someday with a commercial user on that lower level if it warrants it and makes sense, and make a deck up there for a restaurant user and or brewery, distiller, those kinds of things. Although I would say we may have that opportunity on the other end to fulfill that need and demand here soon. So we'll see as things continue to go forward. So, but this just gives a snapshot too of the mezzanine area, which extends on the other end of the building, and gives more of an open air and feeling to that retail user in that space there. So I would open it up to questions.
I'll ask about the lighting.
Sure, you bet. Yeah, I had a chance to contemplate that as you asked the question, and I think it's a great question. It's a fair question. I know our planner and our team internally on our side has been working diligently and thinking that through already. We are looking at alternatives and options, and it's only going to help the fact that you're highlighting this, that it's an important thing that we need to fulfill as a part of our plan. Obviously, we need to be in accordance with the lighting ordinances, or comply with the lighting ordinances, but I do believe we're going to have to address that and make sure that that's in the plan.
And I'll also say, John, I think you should listen to Adam about the rooftop deck. Great idea.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board?
One more, maybe not significant to the proposal, but what's the significance of the name Brakeland?
Well, hopefully this is okay. John's father worked for the railroad, and for a part of that time too, I think he was at the railroad for many years. A veteran as well, a tremendous man, and a pillar in the Danville community. And so that being next to the tracks, we wanted to pay some homage, if you will, to both his father, his family, but also just thought it was kind of cool.
Thank you.
Any other questions? See you, Wendy. Hear you. I will now open up the public hearing. Just remember that once people on this project, we're limited to 3 minutes. Each specs, so if you want to forward, also, if you haven't signed in, you have to sign in as you read, you need to lay paper. So if you want to speak, you stand up, and the mic. Public hearing is now open.
I will put my mask on and move to the side, so. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say, if there are any other questions that we didn't address, I'd be happy to answer them.
A motion that we approve docket 20-08, the Forza development on South 11th Street, pending the applicant adequately addresses any remaining tech comments prior to the applications, and lighting plans for exterior parking are added, that the applicant would be required to submit the photometric plans and cut sheets for those.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Kelly, call the roll, please.
Matt Reynolds?
Yes.
Ashley Paddock? Yes. John Lasley?
Yes.
Kevin Truitt?
Yes.
Keith Campbell?
Yes.
Jeremy Laura?
Yes.
Brian Tandy?
Yes.
Deanne Bachelor?
Yes.
Lori Green? Yes.
Okay. Then, item 27, consideration of initial zoning classification for voluntary annexation application submitted by the Grand Community LLC, consisting of parcels totaling approximately 34.8 acres. The parcels to be annexed are located general boundary of Edgewood subdivision to the west, John Bart Road to the east, Fordyce Road to the south, and East Washington to the north. Ben?
All right. I first will explain the process for you. They can go ahead and bring the computer up so we can see the overall site. But I'll walk through the process here for you. This is step one of about 6 or 7 steps. So we're not, I'll first say what we're not doing tonight. We're not reviewing a residential development tonight. This is the first step where we're reviewing the annexation. There was an annexation petition that was submitted. And the Plannng Commission's job as part of an annexation is to review the site based on the comprehensive plan and determine a recommendation for a zoning district that would become effective once the property is annexed. And the council is the one responsible for annexing property. So you all will provide a recommendation on a zoning district for this piece of property that will be forwarded to the council for them to consider as part of the annexation ordinance. So we do have a very high-level conceptual plan for development that's being proposed. I'm not going to say there's not something being proposed here, but we're just not reviewing that tonight. So this will come in multiple steps. So from tonight, then it will go to the council meeting next Monday night for the first reading of the annexation ordinance, where your zoning recommendation be included. And then at their first meeting then in August, it would be the second reading of the annexation ordinance where they would theoretically adopt that ordinance. At that point, then there is a 30-day waiting period before that annexation becomes effective. Once the annexation has become effective, then we would then have planning jurisdiction over this property, and the applicant's intention then is to file a plan unit development for this entire property. So it's both the property in yellow and the property that's to the west, that's between this property and Edgewood. They would be coming back then for the September Plan Commission meeting with the residential development. So it will be a couple months yet before the actual residential development would come back to you for review and potential recommendations to the council. So tonight we will be looking at the annexation and the potential zoning as it relates to this site according to the comprehensive plan. And then in a couple months, then it'll be back and we'll have more detail about the residential development that's being proposed, and we'll actually be considering that development that time. So you won't see much about the development tonight because that's not what we're reviewing tonight. I'll just be focusing on the overall site where it's located in the comprehensive plan. So just want to make sure that we're clear about that. I do understand that the applicant is going to have a neighborhood meeting that's coming up here in the near future, and that'll be the first time that they introduce some of their ideas for the development here. They are seeking feedback from area residents that they're hoping to incorporate as much as they can into the development before they would submit. So that is kind of their overall goal. There's nothing that's been decided about whether this becomes a residential development or not. There's a lot still to do before we're ready to do that. So just to walk through here, this site, for those that are or are not familiar, this is Edgewood here to the west. To the south here is Washington Street. Fordyce kind of makes the turn and heads to the northeast here, just north of the property. And then you got John Bart Road over here to the east. This property is half of it. I think the intention originally when Edgewood was developed, this entire rest of this property would be developed as part of the Edgewood subdivision. As you can see, there are already some lots that were platted, a part of a street and lots that were platted already for some additional residential lots that were supposed to be out here at that period of time that were never developed, and the roads weren't even put in. So there was intention at some point historically to extend Edgewood over here to the east. It just never happened. So part of this property is already in the city. The actual boundaries of the annexed area don't actually follow the county GIS parcel lines. It's a little different than this. It actually took us a little bit with the applicant to figure out what the actual boundary for the city was, but we did end up uncovering an annexation ordinance in the 70s that had a legal description that we could follow. So I do have the correct legal descriptions for the annexation area, but it generally follows this area as the area is being annexed. So I said, as Mr. Campbell said, it's about 35 acres is proposed being annexed. We do have a petition for annexation that's been signed by the current property owner. So we got all that in place. So in terms of your recommendation for zoning, what the ordinance suggests is that if there is not a development proposal or concept plan, you should provide a recommendation for the single-family SF zoning district. Although the Plan Commission, in this case, if there is a development proposal, you could consider a different district or another district that might be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So in this case, there is a conceptual plan proposed for residential development. So the reason we look for the zoning is really just to put the uses in place that are appropriate. We're not necessarily looking at lot sizes or lot widths or any of those standards necessarily. We're really just looking at the zoning from the perspective of the uses that we would permit for this property. So that's what we did in terms of providing our recommendation to you. The comprehensive plan future land use map designates this area for residential land uses. The residential land use designation provides for primarily single-family detached housing, townhomes and duplexes, and multifamily housing at all levels of housing value. In this case, the development pattern, in the general vicinity of the proposed annexation is single-family detached housing, and it is anticipated that the annexed territory will include similar types of development. In Grand Communities, the applicant did submit the petition for annexation for the land, and it's anticipated the intent to develop this property as a single-family residential neighborhood and likely will request a plan unit development designation. So in terms of looking at the area around, I don't have the zoning map that I can pull up for you, but all of the neighborhoods, or primarily the neighborhoods around this area, are zoned SF2, single-family residential SF2. So we felt like, and actually the property just to the west of this that they're going to develop is currently zone SF2 as well. So given the thought of remaining consistent with the residential zoning classifications that are in this general vicinity, staff has recommended that the Plan Commission recommend the single-family residential SF2 zoning classification to the Common Council for the proposed annexed territory. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the commission?
You know, I know the properties to the west and to the north are already within city limits.
Correct.
But the properties to the east, is that?
They are not. So this property is kind of wrapped on the northwest and south by properties in city limits, but to the east they are not.
Is that blue line?
Yeah, you can kind of see the blue line follows down John Bart Road and then cuts in and follows the eastern property line of this property.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, the western property line of this property.
Any other questions? You have to speak.
Good evening. My name is Amanda Webb, and I work for Grand Communities LLC. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. I'm also here with Amanda Deerdorf. Amanda is our land acquisition manager for the Indianapolis market for Fisher Homes. I want to thank Ben. He's been really great help. Your staff has been wonderful to work with. And I also want to thank you guys for hearing our request tonight. A little bit about this. Ben did a great job summarizing the process. It's very early on for us right now. We have a neighborhood meeting scheduled this week, so we're looking forward to having all the neighbors' input and sharing our ideas at that time. Just a little bit of background. I do work for Grand Communities LLC. Grand Communities is actually the developer for Fisher Homes. I'm not sure how familiar you guys are for Fisher Homes. We are based out of Cincinnati area. We do have a local market of Indianapolis market, and we have several communities in and around the area. We build quality subdivisions, quality communities, and we're looking forward to coming here and building more quality development here. A couple things, Fisher Homes, this year we had our 40th anniversary, so we've been around for quite some time. I know some people question the economy today. We're moving forward and still as successful as ever. So I'm here for any questions that you guys might have, but just I respect we are really early in the process for this, so I'll do my best to answer those, but we are looking forward to bringing some more solidified plans back in September.
Any member of the commission have questions for us?
Amanda, you referenced a neighborhood meeting. Could you share the details on that?
Sure. This coming Thursday at 6 p.m., we will be up at the church, and we invite everybody to come out and join us. And at that time, we will have some of our very conceptual thoughts and ideas, and we are excited and looking forward to meeting with the neighbors and getting their input as well.
Which church was that? I'm sorry.
At the Century Baptist Church? I'm sorry, yes, I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Now I will open it up to public hearing. I'll open it up to public hearing now. Remember again, you can come up to the podium and tell us you got your name and address, and also be sure you sign the card.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name's John Eddings. I live at 301 Edgewood Drive. And last year, my house burnt down, so I had to build a new one. I went to the building inspector, and he told me I had to build on the original footprint because all that property's in a flood zone, a floodplain. How are they going to build houses in a floodplain? If I can't build on I couldn't change anything on my property because it and everything they showed me was in the floodplain. what has changed between last year and now. Excuse me?
I'll address it.
So once the hearing goes, then we'll just play it.
Hi, my name is Sue Muncy. I live at 501 Edgewood Drive for 30 years. Every spring, when it rains, that whole field behind us floods. Last year, it flooded so much, they couldn't even plant. For the last less than a year, we've had a lot of different people back doing surveying, whatever it takes. Every time we see somebody, we go out and talk to them. They've been very helpful. They've said that the property at the south end towards Washington Street is so low, there's no way that they can put in a septic area. My neighbors, several years ago, the septic's backed up right behind my house, and it went in to their tri-level. It ruins their bottom floor. And our main concern is the sewers and the drainage for that area, because it is bad and always has been. Thank you.
My name is April Julian. I live at 522 Glendale Drive. And when I'm looking at this, I'm getting kind of emotional because this is a hidden gem of Lebanon. And I don't think that everybody's aware of exactly how special this neighborhood and how special this land is, because it's kind of like it goes back many years. I mean, it's like raising your kids in the 50s because it's such a quiet neighborhood. There's so many animals, the birds chirping, and it's because there's this green space there that's available. And it was just a fabulous place to raise kids. And I know several young families moved in specifically for that. And I'm very, very concerned about having a neighborhood back there when this green space is just one of the last ones left. I'm looking at all these trees, and that goes right with the floodplain. I mean, if you take away the trees, that's part of the whole drainage system. So I'm very concerned with rezoning this and building a neighborhood, because we're going to lose something very, very special.
We'll give everybody time. Nice to see people here.
My name is Jane Briggs. I've lived at 324 Edgewood Drive for 11 years. Edgewood is a very small addition. It is a circular floor plan, and it is a special area for people that want to walk their dogs, ride their bicycles, all kinds of footwork. I'm concerned about the size of the streets. Edgewood Drive, Glendale Drive, those streets are narrow. With all of this pandemic, we can't hardly get 2 cars down the street. What are we going to do with all of the people that are coming into our area with their cars and vehicles? Are we going to have to not park on the side on the street, or are we going to have one-way streets? What is the plan for those streets? They cannot handle 100 cars a day for the new residents. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kevin Hogger. I live at 911 Morningside Drive. The part of the property actually comes to the back of our house, so I have 3 questions for the developers. That would be, how would you identify and fix the wetlands that are currently behind our house? When it rains, there's standing water for at least 2 or 3 months when there's a hard rain. We also have the federally endangered Indian bats back there as well. And then with all the new housing coming in, with these schools and our kids going to the schools that are already crammed where they don't actually have certain classes, they have art on a cart because there's not enough room for all the kids. How are we going to solve that problem as well? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dawn Walker, and I've lived at 409 Edgewood Drive for 8 years. And my main concern is the water, not only the water flooding, but the creek and building, and how will the water be protected? You know, where the drainage into the creek, or what happens with that water if there's a housing addition going in? So that's my question. What happens to the quality of that water?
Good evening, members. My name is Dave Truitt. I live at 1101 Brookside Drive. I've lived there for the last 30 years. And prior to that, I lived at 413 Edgewood Drive for 10 years. So I know a little bit about the area for the last 40 years. Not to be duplicitous, but there is a huge drainage problem in that area. It's going to take considerable outlay and talent to be able to get rid of it. As you're probably aware, there is a lift station there for the sewage already for sections 1 and 2 of Edgewood. It's right at the corner as Fordyce bends around there in front of Centenary Methodist Church. When I'm in section 4 of Morningside, and when section 4, 5, and 6 were built, I believe the drainage plans for the city streets flow to the south into, part of it flows into the man legal ditch, and the other part flows into an undesignated non-legal drain, both of which converge directly behind my home. In the middle of the winter, if we have a big snowmelt, I have seen water at the top of that ditch when the snow melts. That's just in the winter when you get a real warm up in the snow. So I'm deeply concerned about the drainage there. I know all of my neighbors are deeply concerned about the drainage. Dr. Weary has experienced 2 floods in his house due to the non-legal drain running behind his house that drains section 1 and 2, I believe. No, I'm sorry, section 1 is Edgewood and Glendale Drive. I believe the one on coming in off the church, that's section 3, I think. Some of that may have been alleviated when they got rid of a couple of the bridges on Prairie Creek, but the man legal ditch basically covers, and I don't have the benefit of the presentation materials, but maybe I do. No, maybe it's not. Anyway, to the east.
Put it on there.
Okay, thank you. To the east, I mean, this area right here is the man legal ditch, and it flows this way to the corner of Washington and Fordyce, and that encompasses all of the Edgewood subdivision. All the different sections are flowing into that particular ditch. So that's going to be something that I wish you folks will really look at if you go ahead and consider this development. I'm not saying, you know, me personally, I know there's a lot of people that are concerned about it, but I think everybody in this room needs to be considered about that ditch and the legal ditch. The one that I'm referring to runs right here. There's nothing designated on this. That's a plat, but that is where that the sections up in here of Edgewood flow down into this area. This is Dr. Weary's house on the corner, and this is the area I'm referring to that's had water to the top of it as it flows into Man. A lot of the farm ground out here on John Bart and east of John Bart flows into that Man ditch and then comes around this way. I do see that in their plat, no, this isn't a plat, I'm sorry, but their preliminary drawings, they've got two designated holding ponds, and I would want to look real closely at how they're going to allow that water to drain. I'm assuming the natural flow is going to be to the south because Man and everything goes south, Prairie Creek wise. Sorry? Okay. Don't forget, that's a wetland up there. There's heron in addition to a lot of other wildlife in that area right now.
Anyone else like to speak? Dwight Bridge, 915 Morningside Drive. I can only echo what's just been said to you people. We were the second house built on Morningside Drive. And you get a rainfall that has been spoken of. There has been occasion in the summertime when in front of our place and just on east of us, toward the rest of Morningside, there's been enough water out there that ducks are swimming out there in the summertime. Isn't that nice? And then behind us then is the woods and then the farmland. And there's like a lake back there with the most wonderful mosquitoes you've ever seen in your life. So yes, it's a wetland, and those are a lot of things to be considered when you're thinking about making any additions. Anyone else like to speak?
I'm John Asbury, and 307 Edgewood Drive, been there about 12 years. And everything that they've said, we've heard the flooding. We all know that. But there's other things to take in consideration. The wildlife. There's my neighbor John that spoke first. We get excited every night. There's deer that come out. Where are they going to go? I mean, this is going to displace wildlife. There's and a gentleman over here mentioned Indiana bat that is endangered. That's back there. Heron, they're back there. Mr. Truitt spoke eloquently about everything that needs to be done. That I don't think there's a possible way to have it done. I don't think it's feasible. It's just, I don't know how they can build on a wetland. When my neighbor who lost his house in a fire couldn't even make a patio out, and they're going to want to build several houses. It just doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak before I close the hearing? Not seeing anyone come forward, close the public hearing. Ben, speak please.
Sure, I'll address what I can. I'll just reiterate, we're not we're not here tonight to approve zoning for a residential development to even suggest that we think a residential development is feasible here. This is merely zoning to provide for uses that might be appropriate on this property. So, but I will address what I can, at least from a general perspective, having looked at this site. From a floodplain perspective, there's about, I think it's about 50% of this property is in the floodplain, the other 50% is not. Part of Edgewood is in the floodplain, part of it is not. So depending on where you're at in the neighborhood, you are either in and out of the floodplain, you probably have flood insurance or not. So what they're looking at this site is the part that they're developing is primarily out of the floodplain. They are doing some cut and fill in other places, and what I mean by that is they're going to raise the ground level in some areas to bring it out of the floodplain, and in other areas they're going to create additional volume to compensate for it. So there's a whole lot of engineering that goes into that. In terms of that, but yeah, they are working through that. We've got surveyor's office reviewing this. We've got our reviewers looking at it from the floodplain ordinance perspective. They're going to have to meet all the requirements for both floodplain and detention. The one thing I will mention, Edgewood and Morningside, those areas, they don't have any detention facilities in their neighborhoods. The flood flows directly into the storm sewer and directly in the creeks. What'll happen here is the water will go into the detention facilities, and then those detention facilities will release the water at an adequate rate into the creeks. So it will actually slow the flow of water that goes into the creeks so that the volume doesn't increase as quickly as it would before. That's the nature of the detention facilities. So this will be a little bit different from that perspective, and they'll have more details when they come back in a couple of months. So that's how they're looking at the floodplain. I know there's a lot of mention of the wooded areas. There is a 75-foot regulated drain easement that runs along the banks of that creek, and they are not allowed to touch that area at all. So that at least at a minimum, and actually in some places there's more, but at a minimum there is 75 feet along the bank of that creek that will be untouched and remain as natural as it is today. In addition, that north end, they're primarily not touching that wooded area at the north end of the property at all. That's going to remain wooded, same as it is now. So that was something that we asked them to take a look at it from early on. In terms of traffic, they are doing a traffic study right now to see how both volumes and where traffic would likely leave this area. They're looking at a number of different options, whether they take the traffic into Edgewood where the stub streets already are. They were already intended to be stub streets to provide for additional sections of Edgewood if they ever developed. They are also looking at some alternatives to provide their own entrance out onto Fordyce Road. So they're looking at trying to do a number of different things there from a traffic perspective. But they are looking at doing a preliminary traffic study for us that they'll provide to us before the next Plannng Commission meeting to look at that. In terms of wetlands, they have delineated all those on their plans. There are a few of them that they will be developing on, and they have to remediate those. You can either remediate them by providing wetlands somewhere else in the watershed, or you can buy into a wetlands bank. So they are doing that, but again, there's a number of the wetlands that they aren't going to be touching. In terms of schools, my understanding is the schools have a ton of capacity in them. It may be building by building. My understanding is they have between 800 and space for additional 800 to 1,000 students in the overall school system. So they do have capacity, but I know a number of the buildings are at capacity, so I'm sure the schools would be looking to figure out how they would do that. So that's just some of the general things. Again, we're not reviewing the overall plan. I'm not suggesting that it's feasible to develop this. Oh, one other additional thing, there was some mention of the sewers. Actually, the sewers that are in Edgewood right now don't have capacity to handle the sewer from this property. It was actually intended originally in the 70s when this was developed, or 70s or 80s, when this was developed, that this area would flow into the sanitary sewers that are in Edgewood. Those don't have capacity downstream. So and actually the lift station that was mentioned by one of the neighboring owners that's just north of here also is a lift station that's very, very old, that doesn't work very well anymore, needs to be taken offline. So they're actually, as part of this project, they're going to take that lift station offline and take all of the existing sanitary sewer, including their property, further north to a newer lift station that'll actually go through the church's property to a lift station that's further north. So they will actually be addressing the sanitary sewers in this area quite a bit too, in order to alleviate some of the existing issues that are already taking place. That's what I can at least generally answer right now, or at least provide some additional information on. There will be a lot more information on all of these things in a couple of months when this comes back. Again, tonight we're really looking at this, the Plannng Commission is really looking at this from a use perspective. If this property were to be annexed by the council, what would be the appropriate land uses for this property? And clearly that would be residential and not something commercial or industrial or anything else. Residential land use follows our comprehensive plan for this property. It's what was it's what was planned for this property for the last 50 years. It just never developed. So that's what the recommendation is that if the council decides to annex this property, that the recommendation would be that they would place a single-family residential SF2 zoning classification on the property. You guys want to address anything else? Yeah. The applicant may have some additional information.
Thank you. I just want to just echo Ben. We are looking into doing a traffic study. We are trying to better the sanitary situation. We've actually been working with the site for, goodness, probably over a year now, just trying to work through different engineering issues as far as floodplain and whatnot, drainage issues. So we also have a wetlands delineation done. In turns, that also is an environmental study. So we are working through all of these issues. We understand that there are a lot of concerns, and we're just trying our best to address that. However, we plan to address that better when we come back before commission with a preliminary development plan. I think that'll help answer a lot of questions that you guys will have. So thank you. Oh, yes. Again, we will be meeting 6 p.m. on Thursday at the Century Methodist Church. So, and everybody's welcome to, yep, everybody is welcome to attend. We look forward to it. Yeah, should have received a postcard. Yep. Thank you so much.
The creek kind of runs just on the north side of Washington Street there, and then there's on both sides of the creek, there's a 75-foot regulated drain easement that's actually regulated by the county surveyor's office. So the county surveyor has said that the lots, I mean, nothing can be developed within that 75. Actually, it's a total of 150 feet if you include both sides of the creek. But that will be undeveloped, will remain open so the surveyor can maintain the creek over time. They wouldn't even let the lots extend into that regulated drain easement. So all the lots had to be pulled totally out. So there was a differentiation between the residential development and that regulated drain easement. So it will remain natural. If anything happens within that regulated drain easement, it's because the county surveyor is doing something. They could. It'd be a very, very expensive bridge. And it probably wouldn't work for, again, the bridge has to be out of the floodplain. It has to be above the flood elevation, so that lends some additional challenges to actually building a bridge, because that actually ends up restricting the flow of water by putting a bridge in. So I don't even know if the county surveyor would want a bridge there, but it would be an extremely expensive bridge for the benefit it would provide. Yeah, by providing detention, it will create some benefits, because right now the water all sheet drains directly either in the neighborhoods into the storm sewers that go directly into the creeks, or on this field that sheet drains directly into the creek. What'll happen now is that not only will they have to compensate for the existing floodplain, but they'll have to also compensate for the storm water that's created by the neighborhood. So, and that all that water in this neighborhood will flow into those ponds that they've shown on the conceptual plan, which again, we'll look at in a couple of months more specifically, but it will flow into ponds that have enough volume to hold that, and then it will be released at an acceptable rate according to our stormwater ordinance into that creek. So it will actually probably slow the volume of water at over a certain period of time that flows into the creek. The total volume will go there, but it will just be released at a slower rate, so the level in that creek doesn't rise as significantly as it does now. Yeah, I think a lot of their drainage flows to the creek in some way, shape, or form, whether it, I said, part of the challenge was is Edgewood was built on the floodplain and it wasn't really compensated for it at that time. So that was something that happened back in the 70s before there were a lot of people really reviewing floodplain at this level. But certainly, this is going to have to accommodate, they're going to have to look at from a stormwater perspective, all the water coming into the site from around it, and then the stormwater they also create. They have to create detention for all of that flow of water so that it all can be released into the creek at an acceptable rate. Correct. It certainly won't make it worse. I can at least say that. It should improve it. I can't guarantee that, but it certainly will not make it worse.
Essentially, they would be required to capture any of the water from the plains on their property. And collect that, put it through the tank system, and then slowly release it. Bottom of the forest goes to the creek. Flattening curve. Flattening curve of how the water goes into the creek is now held in the detention systems and let out in the creek. So in terms of will it improve drainage in Edgewood and Morningside? Well, the water that is draining off that field into Edgewood and Morningside will flow into the field. So from that perspective, theoretically, there is some improvement in Edgewood and Morningside. Is it noticeable? I can't tell you until we really look at the drainage calculations to see how much water they are capturing. Generally speaking,
We approving the annexation and recommending the zoning classification all in one motion, or do we need a separate?
I would just reiterate what it says, that you recommend, so your motion would be recommending the single-family residential SF2 zoning classification to the Common Council. That would be what the motion would state.
I'll make a motion, docket 20-17, that the Plan Commission recommend the single-family residential SF2 zoning classification to the Common Council.
Matt Reynolds?
Yes.
Ashley Paddock? Yes. John Lasley?
Yes.
Kevin Pruitt?
Yes.
Keith Campbell?
Yes.
Jeremy Lawler?
Yes.
Brian Tandy? Yes. And Bachelor?
Yes.
Margaret? Yes.
And just for, I know there's a number of people in the audience, this will be back in front of the Plannng Commission. Right now, the anticipation is at the September meeting. We will send out additional notices for that meeting. We only notice within 300 feet of this property, so that's why a number of you that live in the neighborhoods probably did not get an invitation, because we provided them the same list of property owners that we would provide notice for these meetings, as opposed to the entire neighborhood. So we will provide notices for all those Plannng Commission meetings as required by state law, and it should be at this point in September.